The Jags have been on a roller coaster ride for the last 2 years, but this one, it ain't what y'all signed up for. I'm going to explain all of this to you in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy day after Christmas. Welcome to another edition of Locked On Jaguars. I am the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast, Tony Wiggins, where it's your team every day. And we thank you for making us your first listen. A quick reminder, we are free to subscribe to on our YouTube page, that is Locked On Jaguars. Make sure you tap in, hit that like button, subscribe, and also hit the bell so you receive notifications each and every time we drop an episode. And wherever you listen to your audio podcast, make sure you tap into that location every single day to make sure you don't miss an episode of Locked On Jaguars. Today's sponsor for the show is Gametime, man. Man, make sure you go to the Gametime and download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, man, we got to get to it. I got to thank my everydayers for joining the show. Thank you for joining us every single day. Without you, there's no us, and we appreciate that. And if you want to be an everydayer, you can join every day too. All right, man, the roller coaster from hell, the roller coaster ride from hell, that's what it has turned into for the Jaguars. It started out, even though we don't like to connect seasons around here, there's a reason why you're more disappointed now than you were at some point in the past because of expectations. We'll talk about the roller coaster ride from hell and how being on a roller coaster, even when it's good, you always seem to wait for the bottom to fall out. And that's what it seems like it's done here. Segment 2, where to start with a fix, what we're going to call the fix. Shout out to Scarface, the artist, for dropping that nice little red desk. But yeah, I had an album called The Fix, right? Well, we need to have an album called The Fix. The Fix, how do you fix the Jacksonville Jaguars? And last but not least, I was tempted to start the show with this, but I kind of have to set this up with the first two segments, the Trevor Lawrence opinion. And while my opinion of Trevor Lawrence is going to anger some people, it'll also be viewed by other people as more and more, let's just say, being tolerant of him and more excuses. Enabling is what I think Richard Sherman told me it is on social media. I don't think that's the case, but we'll go through it anyway. I think it's a little more nuanced than that. So we'll get to it. First of all, I want to touch the fan base real quick. And now it's starting to get to the media. My man Dan Hicken went off on an epic rant. And I believe Dan, because Dan usually doesn't do stuff like that on his TV show, which is the flagship TV station of the Jaguars. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. He's right. He's right. And you can only think about the fans in this roller coaster that they've been put on and why this feels so bad. It feels so bad because last year, the end of last year, which was a roller coaster as well, they were 2-7 and ended up 9-8. And they were down 27-0 in a playoff game that they won. There's always this thinking that when something good finally happens to something or someone or a team, where something bad always happens, there is this feeling that it's finally over, right? All of that angst and all of that inconsistency and all of that bad stuff that had happened to this franchise is finally over. Now, we're not going to even pay attention to how we got to the point where we thought it ended. Like, did they do everything correct to get into that position? Didn't matter because they were in that position. And the position was that they were in the playoffs, they were winning the division, and they were winning games, right? So when the Jaguars get to that point, you're not worried about how they got there because you think that the lessons that they learned from actually being in the moment will give them whatever it is in their DNA that they need, even if they don't get to the ultimate result, which was a championship, that at some point this would mean, okay, so we're going to garbage in, garbage out, take the good stuff in, kick the bad stuff out, carry this over to next year. And we've now learned how to be the type of team that won't end up where the Jaguars have ended up 90% of the time, which is losing and talking about hope and optimism, right? As opposed to actually playing for something. I want to be clear. The Jacksonville Jaguars are still in control of their own destiny to make the playoffs. They are. But the fact that you know that and you still feel the way you feel today is the reason why I'm talking like this, is because at some point the expectations changed. And those expectations changed at the end of last season, in the beginning of this year, where all of the things that appeared to be promising, Doug Pederson, Super Bowl winning coach, Trevor Lawrence, a quote unquote franchise quarterback, here together, giving this organization some credibility that they never had before, combined with the fact that they started winning games. All right. Mind you, nobody gives a damn about how you got there and what had to happen for you to get there. Because down the stretch last year, they beat Dallas, they beat Baltimore, they beat a lot of teams. They beat a few teams in there, even the Chargers in the playoffs, the team that everybody always, I don't know why everybody act like the Chargers have been perennial winners, but they always do. But they beat a lot of teams that folks thought that, were better than them, right? With quarterbacks that folks felt were better than Trevor. With teams, against teams that were on paper more talented than the Jaguars. And that's what I want to get back to. More talented than the Jaguars. The success the Jaguars had turns out to be fool's gold, and it tricked us all. And I said us. And I said with a capital U. That's because I figured the way that this team was, if they were winning when they were young and not as talented as everybody else, what would happen if they spent another offseason and draft getting more talent? As it turns out, Trent Baalke thought that wasn't necessary. As it turns out, I don't know if he felt the need to agree or co-sign with it, but Doug Pederson basically said that we like our team. Y'all hear me? Y'all hear me? Good. Sometimes you can win, and it doesn't mean that you have the guys in place to keep winning. It just means that your program, all of the things that you decided that were important, and you got guys playing out of their mind, and they were playing with nothing to lose, and they were playing with all of their pride and their family's name on the back of their shirt, and they were playing for a city that cheered for them even when they were 2-7, that never stopped believing in them. All of those magical things happened to come together at one time, and then the Jaguars got into the playoffs and won a game that they should have lost because of the way they played. And then played on the road, but wasn't good enough to win because they even made mistakes in that game. So we focused on the success that was almost like the perfect storm to get to that success, but they ignored the mistakes. They ignored those first half interceptions by Trevor because they won the game, they ignored it. To me, they ignored the fact that they may have been relying too much on Jamal Agnew from the line of scrimmage, and he started fumbling the ball. To me, they ignored the offensive line because they got away with it. They ignored the fact that they needed more help on defense, and there were players on that defense that weren't as good as they thought. They ignored the fact that there was another level to go to. And now you had two things. You had a low to high last year, and now you have a high to low. I'm going to tell you something. That fall feels a lot worse than that temporary rise. It absolutely does. Where do I start to fix it? Y'all know where I'm going. Y'all know where I'm going. And even though you know where I'm going, I'm going to take you there anyway, because you have to start with a look at the top, which is one of the reasons I put that poll out early in the year, one that I will come back and revisit today. I'm going to do that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. And we'll continue in just a moment here on Locked On Jaguars. I got to let y'all know about FanDuel, man, because it is time. If you haven't done it all year, it's still not too late. It's getting a little colder outside, and the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get a $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. I'll say that again. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Now, if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. All right, man, running it down here on Locked On Jaguars. We're at your team every day. We always thank you for making us your first listen. We talked about going from low to high last year and then high to low, and which one hurts worse. I think the hurt of this high to low hurts worse because when you go from low to high and you don't have high expectations, then it feels like a bonus. But when you go from high to low, when you have higher expectations, it stings and hurts worse because you are not who you think you are. If this ain't a go check on your face moment, I don't know what it is. And what I mean by go check on your face is you walk around here thinking you're cute and you just don't know. You got crust on your face. You need to go look in the mirror to check yourself out before you walk around here in public pretending to be something that you're not. And I think the Jaguars right now are pretenders. And the biggest thing is I don't think they lied to the fan base. I don't think they lied to the media. I think they lied to themselves. And the reason why I believe they lied to themselves is because when you hear them talk, all of them, whether it's Doug Pederson, Trevor Lawrence, or whoever, they have no answers for what they're doing right now. Trevor says, it's like we don't even practice. I don't know who that's a bigger indictment on. Is it more of an indictment on the coaching staff, or is it more an indictment on him? And we're going to talk about him being Trevor Lawrence, in segment 3. When you get so many people, especially so many prominent people saying, I don't know what's going on, it's like we don't even practice. Doug Pederson said something to the effect of, I haven't seen him do that. Or you practice, you play just like you practice. Or we ask guys to do more when they're not here at the facility. Or this is something that should have been happening in preseason. You know, it's the same thing I'm going to get on Urban Meyer about. When Urban Meyer came out in the very first preseason game and said, we're playing too slow. I don't want to play that way. I don't know why we only have this and I don't know. So I'm always tripping when the person in charge says stuff like that. It's because it's like you're there. You're literally right there while it's happening. And I know during the game, this is why I always get on people about play calling. Because during the game, that's not you coach in the locker room. You fix stuff behind closed doors. You ain't fixing nothing on the fly in the game because you're going to get punched in your face. There ain't no time when you're in there to be thinking. It's time to be playing and trusting all of your work you've done. So getting back to that, what have they done? When somebody says it's like we don't practice, when a player says that, when a coach says, you know, you play the way you practice, and I try to tell guys to do more. And when a coach says that, and he said, I haven't seen them, this is the kind of stuff that I expect early in the year, but to be doing that now, and I can't do it. They have to do it. At some point, there's a disconnect. There's an absolute disconnect at that point, and it's hard to pinpoint where it is. And right now, the fan base and the media are all, some people are pointing in the same direction. Most people are pointing in opposite directions. Truth of the matter is, it doesn't really matter what we all think. The result is what it is. I think you have to start at the very top. When you have everybody, and granted, in our opinion, the top of the food chain is the quarterback and the head coach. But there's an actual top of the food chain other than that. Because if Doug Pederson is telling us that, if he has a talk with Shad Khan, an honest look at your face moment, look in the mirror moment, what do you think he's saying? I don't know. Those, in my opinion, have always been unacceptable answers for when the boss wants to find out what's the problem. The thing that I put you in charge of, you can't definitively tell me. So I think there is another answer that Doug shouldn't share with us that I'm going to take a stab at answering myself. where do we start? What's the problem? Here's the answer. We aren't good enough. And if the question comes after that, why? We haven't drafted well enough. We haven't team built well enough. This is the part where you can actually go back if you're the coaching. You can say, okay, here's what we don't have. Here's what we need in order to be successful. If you know that answer. If you don't know the answer, you don't need to be the coach of the Jaguars. But if you know that answer, my question is, did we have an opportunity to get those things? When and where? Can you point to me and show me what we could have done? This ain't cherry picking, and this is not nitpicking, because the difference in winning and losing is very, very small, and it's one or two bad decisions every single time, right? If you make one or two bad decisions every single offseason, like for instance, this was pre-Trevor Lawrence, not taking Lamar Jackson and taking Taven Bryan. And some people said yesterday, well, they should have took Will Hernandez. That was a smart pick. No, the smart pick would be taking a dude that is like one of the three best players in the NFL right now when you didn't have a good quarterback. That's the smart play. And we can have all these think pieces and overthink stuff all we want to. But there were people that night that booed when Lamar Jackson was not taken. Fifth year option with Blake be damned, because they could have got out of that, which they did after one season. You're looking at a dude that's won an MVP that is like one of the most dynamic players in the history of this league, and they didn't take him. Okay, so you don't even have to go back that far because that preceded this current administration. You can say what went wrong. You could look at the guys they didn't take that they could have taken. You could look at how they could have changed their team. They can rationalize why. So in this complex world that we live in, especially when everything is on social media really, really fast, I want to say this. I want to make this proclamation. There's a big difference between understanding why and understanding whether you should have done it. Everybody can rationalize and explain everything that they do. If I say, I got it, I feel you. Like, I know exactly what you were thinking, but you could have been thinking that and still been thinking the wrong thing. And you could be thinking that and still, because you're thinking the wrong thing, choose the wrong players. At some point, they thought that this team was good enough. And that, to me, is a death knell for an NFL franchise. You just don't do that, ever. This game is a gladiator sport that is built on competition. No better should there's no place better to be as an organization when your competition is me versus me. Now, I know because of the financial constraints and the things that you have to do, that it's not always wise to think that you can just keep changing certain players at certain positions. And one of them is quarterback, and we're going to get into that in just a second. But those support positions around that position, absolutely, man, you don't do what the Jaguars did. The Jaguars, you'd have thought the Jaguars had the steel curtain. Like they had 12 Hall of Famers on their team, the way they stood pat in the offseason. It was absolutely ridiculous. I said it then and I'll say it now. It was absolutely ridiculous, and it was the wrong thing to do. And now they've learned the hard way that those guys that they have as their frontline players, they ain't good enough. I don't want to cut everybody. I think that's silly. That's asinine. I just think you're asking a bunch of B- guys to be A+ players in A+ situations, and that just won't happen. And they had a chance. They set themselves back because they didn't move fast enough. And now they've set themselves back a year. And now it's got more complicated because now they got to start paying people at some point. Which leads me to Trevor Lawrence and a tweet or a post that I put out on X saying that there's no way you can extend him right now. And everyone who saw that just conveniently acted like they did not see the words right now. Doesn't mean you're not going to extend him. When I say right now, I meant if you follow the show and not, I'm just going to assume that most people don't all the time. Right now I meant he was next up after Justin Herbert and Lamar and Jalen Hurts got their money. I said Trevor's next up. Now I'm saying there ain't no rush. And I'm going to tell you why I said there ain't no rush, and I'm going to do it in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. All right, I got to tell you about Gametime, man. Gametime and the Gametime app. And there is no rush when you're buying tickets. You can absolutely wait to the last minute. Am I telling you to procrastinate? No, but I'm just telling you that waiting until the last minute or procrastinating is it not the death sentence that everybody thinks it is because of Gametime. Gametime specializes in buying tickets and selling tickets to people who wait until the last minute because it only takes you seconds with 2 taps on the Gametime app. They have deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, an hour, even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last minute seats. Here's what you do, man. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. I'm going to tell you again, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Third and final segment here on Locked On Jaguars. Hoping you all are having a nice holiday and a nice time spent with your family. The Jaguars aren't making you feel real good about the team right now. And I know it doesn't feel good for a lot of y'all to have these conversations about Trevor Lawrence. Ain't no hard conversations necessary. No think pieces necessary. It's just that you got to get out of your feelings because I'm going to tell you why. I think Trevor Lawrence is an amazing talent. He's an amazing talent, but there have been a lot of amazing talents that have played the quarterback position that just didn't do amazing things. Guys that could make throws that were unbelievable. Guys that wanted to. I think Trevor Lawrence is a good person. I think he's nice. I think he's genuine. I also think he's tough. I've seen him play through injuries. I've seen him get banged up. I've seen him gut games out. I've seen him start games that some of us have scratched our head and said, well, maybe he shouldn't be playing today. All of those things. There's a lot of intangibles that work the way that you want them to work. There have been adjectives placed on Trevor Lawrence, however, that have made us believe, including myself at some point, that he was Superman. He was Superman in a game that requires you to have not only those unique abilities to have that label, but it takes you to have the super friends also. And that's why I don't think Trevor Lawrence has, and I disagree with future Hall of Famer Richard Sherman that says he has plenty. I don't think he has plenty. I think he has about what they have, which is making them a 500 ball club. I think they can beat bad teams. I don't think they can beat good teams, and I think it's a toss-up with about 12 teams right smack in the middle, depending on how they play. And in those games, Trevor Lawrence has been more of a disappointment to me than he has been someone who looks generational. And that's just honest. There are folks that love to point out the fact that the interior of the offensive line leaves something to be desired, and I will agree with you with that. There are those that point out that by design, the offense, whether it be because of talent or not, does not test the middle of the field enough. I will agree with you with that. I will also say that Trevor Lawrence doesn't have a receiver that is truly a bad ball catcher. And Zay Jones is the closest, and Zay Jones has been hurt. I'll give you that too. I'll give you the fact that a running game is supposed to help a quarterback, and that Trevor hasn't had much of a running game, and maybe that has something to do with talent too. I'll give you that. I'll give you the fact that before I even said anything about Trevor Lawrence, I said that they haven't done a good job of team building and getting talent. I'll give you that too. But give me this. Give me the benefit of the doubt that after watching football for 48 years of my life, that I know how to walk and chew bubble gum at the same time. That I can say all of those things about Trevor Lawrence are true and still say he is doing things that you should not do if you are a generational talent who expects generational results. Both things can be true. It's not a binary issue. Both things could be true at the same time. He's also not as bad as a lot of people think that he is. He's just a dude whose hype doesn't match up to the reality. And the reality is probably somewhere closer to what it should have been in the first place, and that is he got a lot of talented things about him, but he's tough. And those are things that you really don't know. How is the guy going to respond when he starts getting hit? And Trevor Lawrence, in my opinion, has responded very, very well because he's running for his life a lot these days. And he's doing it while he's banged up and doing it playing behind a patchwork offensive line sometimes, and then he's doing it throwing to receivers that are limping out there with knee braces and everything else. So there's a lot that happens here, right? And there's a lot. He's doing it a lot of times without the team having the lead too. All of those things can be true, and I can still say, but I see him doing things that I don't see other great players, regardless of the situation, doing. Just a little context. In 1989, I believe it was, the Dallas Cowboys went 1-15, and Troy Aikman was the number one pick at some point, either that year or the year before. And I never saw a quarterback take a beating that way. But I never questioned whether he was that guy or not, because that's what it looks like when you're not surrounded by a whole bunch of stuff and you don't quit. And then you start coming back. You go from winning 1 game to 5 games and then to 7. And then you get into the playoffs. And then the next year, and now you're on that roll. You can see once the talent around a player builds up, the results change, but that guy kind of still stays the same as he was, but just has this slow, steady improvement. I'm thinking that the further we're getting away from Trevor being drafted, you're now seeing people say, I don't know, man. Is he good? Sure. But he's not that. That is sort of the outlier approach. That, whatever that thing is, we never know who's going to be that guy. We can count those guys, maybe 15 of those guys in my entire life, and that's what everybody thought that Trevor was and was going to be. It hasn't been fair. It hasn't seemed fair, especially when the way he came in with Urban Meyer and all of that dysfunction. Sure, that existed. But there are things he's doing now, man, with the football. Low throws, high throws. At this point in his development, he shouldn't be that anymore. This team doesn't win unless he plays well or the defense plays extremely well and they get a bunch of turnovers. At some point, I can't say that they literally, like the Chargers game, you can say, well, they won that game because of Trevor. No, they won the game because the defense didn't let them score in the second half, with the exception of a field goal. That's why they won. Doug Pederson said we have to score every time and we have to stop them in that game, and that's exactly what they did. So there were a lot of things that occurred and a lot of things that happened that kind of masked the fact that I want to see him not turn the ball over. I think the thing that is changing my mind about him more than anything is, and it's not changing my mind all the way to the bust category. I'm committed. I'm committed emotionally to Trevor Lawrence being the quarterback, and I don't think they need to swap him out. I think they need to improve things around him, change the scheme up, keep him upright a little bit more, get a better running game, and then we'll see exactly what it is. But those are almost perfect situations where you could just go plug Joe Schmo in there and they'll be successful. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is you can't deny that what you see is something that you did not expect to see. This hasn't gone the way you wanted it to go when you think of Doug and Trevor. I really wonder in my mind if Doug Pederson is sitting there thinking behind it, like, you can't do that. When Doug talks about protecting the football, he is talking about Trevor Lawrence, nobody else. So miss me with all of that. Trevor's the only people that are misguided in this. It's not the people that are criticizing Trevor Lawrence. It's the people that fail to criticize Trevor Lawrence based on what they imagined and what they thought it was. Y'all the blind ones. The blind people are the ones that fail. And you know what? Because you never want to admit that you're wrong. I got on here and said he's a franchise guy. He's one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the league. But when he stops playing that way and when he's not like that, man, you got to just call this thing out for what it is, and you got to talk about it. And you have to admit, this isn't what I've been describing. This isn't what I've been defending. And whether y'all want to admit it or not, it's the truth. There's a little happy space here, and that is this. I think they still need to be committed to him, but I don't think they need to give him $250 million tomorrow or in the next 6 months. I don't. And I'm going to think that until he proves me otherwise. All right, you guys, make sure you check me out here on the Locked On Jaguars podcast every single day, where it's your team every day. We thank you for always making us your first listen. We ain't going to call it a hard conversation. We're just going to call it reality. And this is the reality of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Right now, they are fighting for their playoff lives. And the thing that I told y'all was, did you want to be here and see the truth? Or did you want to still feel like a lie and have the Jaguars in control of the AFC South just because you think that anything can happen or anything's possible in the playoffs? I wanted the truth. I wanted to see exactly what it was, so we'd stop believing that this team was something that it's not. And I got my wish. Now I just have to be able to accept the fact that what I saw is the truth that I asked for. It's the hard look in the mirror, and I hope the Jaguars do it to themselves when it comes time to figuring out how they're going to fix it.